Hi, thanks for watching this video. Today I want to talk about something that is quite dear to me really, and you can probably tell from my general shape. I rather like food. And in the Bible, food plays a major part. If we look right back to the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve could take whatever they wanted. And there was just one rule for them, not to eat from a certain tree. And that rule was too hard. And they did. And they were expelled from the garden. And as one of the punishments for disobeying that was the curse of work. And it's a curse felt all too keenly on a Monday morning when the alarm goes off. But from that, from work, came bread. It's a type of food you can't get without working. It doesn't grow on its own. You have to make it. And this morning, I want to talk to you about bread. When Moses was in Egypt, during the 10 plagues of Egypt, bread played a very important role in that last plague. Amongst other things, the Israelites were told by God to make unleavened bread. This was really an act of faith for them, to make bread without yeast. Put a bit of salt in there so they could eat it along the way. They didn't have time to let the bread rise. They were going to escape that night. It was a real act of faith. And that's something I think we miss out on. Today we tend to look for the sign that something is right. We tend to look for the sign of faith and then we'll step out in it. But for the Israelites, it was really the other way around. They had to step out in faith. They had to make the bread. They had to prepare to leave. And then the sign came with the 10th plague, the death of the Egyptian firstborn, that was the time to go. And so they left. And no doubt they took their bread with them and they ate it along the way. And it was good. And this is the similar type of bread that I'm going to be making today. It's a very, very basic flour, bit of salt, bit of oil, bit of water, mix it up. Nothing complicated, nothing extreme, no yeast, no leaven, just basic, flat, chapati style type of bread. Moving a little bit further on in the story, the Israelites are out there in the desert, and during their time of slavery, they've become institutionalized. They're not used to looking after themselves. They're used to being told what to do. They're used to being told when to do it. They're not used to what we would consider normal freedoms of life. And in the desert, they obviously find food hard to come by. And God provides for them. He provides for them with manna, bread from heaven. A direct translation, really, or the closest translation, really, of the word manna is, what is it? And it's described as a flaky substance that falls to the ground. And the Israelites were told that they should go out and just collect what they needed for the day. Day before the Sabbath, collect what they needed for that day and the Sabbath. Fairly simple to do. Sadly, it didn't take long before the lesson of Eden was lost, was forgotten, that needed to be retaught. Follow the simple rules. Don't be greedy. And people took too much. Do we do that sometimes? Do we take too much? It seems that whenever you ask mathematicians what a perfect number is, they can come out with all sorts of ideas and they've got all sorts of formulas to work out, and That's great, but it seems to me that for most people, the perfect number is just one more. Just one more million and I'll be happy. Just one more car and I'll be fine. Just one more holiday, just one more. The problem is that just one more goes on and on and on. And you take enough for the day, and then just one more, and then just one more, and then just one more. God's command was to take enough for the day, and that he would provide. One of Jesus' teachings was always that God will provide, that God will be our salvation. So moving forward in time to Jesus' baptism, and after his baptism he was taken out into the desert where he was tempted, and the first temptation was to turn stones into bread. And we can understand that. Jesus was out there for a while. He would have been hungry, he'll have been thirsty, he'll have needed a bath, he'll have needed a sit down and a rest. And it's hard to have a sit down and a rest when you're feeling hungry. So it's a temptation that's understandable. And I've always understood this to be that Jesus was tempted simply to feed himself. And I think part of that will be true. He was out in the desert for a while. He will have been hungry. He will have been tired. He will have been thirsty. He will have wanted a meal and a rest. That's a normal human experience. But I think Jesus also was tempted to provide bread for others, to redo the manna from heaven, to make the feeding of the 5,000 the ultimate act rather than one act of many. How different would the Gospels be if that was the case? How different would it be if Jesus had opened a soup kitchen? Jesus' mission was different from that. In that temptation, the devil was trying to get Jesus off course, was trying to get Jesus to do something other than his primary mission. His primary mission, as it says in Mark's Gospel, is to herald in the kingdom of God and to bring good news to the poor. Part of that is providing for physical, daily needs, yes. But Jesus' main mission was to do things for us that we couldn't do for ourselves. For the cross, for the resurrection, to herald the kingdom of God, and to enable and to encourage and to empower for us to do for people who can't. At the Last Supper, the next important time when bread comes into the story. The Last Supper was held at Passover, a very important time where we remember the first part of the story when Moses told the Israelites to make the unleavened bread, right back to the beginning again. And they will have made it out similar to this and made it ready to cook, ready to eat, easy to make on the road. As part of the Passover meal, as part of the Seder, the ritual that remembers this, people would take a piece of bread, unleavened bread, and the younger person in the group would ask a series of questions to the elder, to the most senior person there. And they would ask about the various elements that were out for the ritual. And they would retell the story of the Exodus through the ritual of these questions and the answers. And it would come to the part with the bread. And the question would be, why do we have unleavened bread? What does this mean? And Jesus, the leader of the group, was supposed to say, well, this bread was made quickly to be eaten whilst the Israelites, the Hebrews, were running away. But he didn't. He took a piece of bread and he broke it. And he said, this is my body given for you. And he shared it out. I'm sure that Jesus' disciples by now were spending somewhere around 3 years with him, will have been used to Jesus changing things up a little bit. Jesus showed what he meant by a broken body the following day when he died on the cross. But that wasn't the end of the story. We know how the story goes on the Easter Sunday when Jesus rose again. We know how this became the church, the history, as the disciples moved forward and moved through time for 2,000 years. In the book of Acts, Acts chapter 6, right at the beginning, some widows were unsure as to where their next meal was going to come from. And the disciples got together and they provided for those people. Let's put that in modern language. Some of the elderly members of the parish, of the area, were not getting their meals on wheels. And so the church stepped in and the church provided. Notice how they stepped in and they provided. They didn't set up a committee meeting. They didn't sit and pray and wring their hands. They just appointed people to do. And they went out and they did. And people got fed and people got their meals. I think this is the point of the story. The point of the story is not just to look at the history and to look at what happened, but to look at what it means for us today. When people are praying in the Lord's Prayer and saying, give us this day our daily bread, I don't think people are expecting manna from heaven. I think people are hoping that others will be generous and share what they have. Amen.